Hello everyone. There is an interesting duality in worldly life versus Dhamma practice. If we do not make an effort to do things differently, we always try to fix things with something else. We always try to cover up things. We feel bad? Well, isolate the problem and then do something about it. In Dhamma practice, we do something that sounds very similar, but works on a completely different level. Today we learn about the difference between shifting our cravings versus uprooting our cravings. But first, we must make one thing very clear. That kind of loses significance nowadays for many people. Meditation, according to the Buddha, is almost exclusively about craving, suffering, and the way leading out of suffering. The vast majority of new traditions do not even mention craving anymore, and if they do, it is more of a side quest, which is rather problematic in my opinion, let's put it like that. For them, it is often about aesthetic pleasures, non-duality, no self, grand and mythical experiences, and even spiritual superpowers. The suttas had a completely different focus, and the Buddha even said that he only teaches one thing, and he is true to that. So, to understand the difference between shifting craving and uprooting craving, we must obviously get a good understanding of what craving even is. Believe it or not, this is not at all easy to understand. The moment you truly understand craving, you become a sotapanna. And this is kind of the point of the entire practice before the right view. The knowledge of craving is the knowledge of suffering, and if you really understand that word fully, you would indeed be at least a sotapanna. Craving is not in the things in the world. Craving is in our attitude toward the world. It is in the wanting of things to be different, to be other, to be better, to not be bad, to experience something else, to summarize craving in a different way. Or in other words, craving is in our intentions of greed, intentions of aversion, and intentions of a delusion or distraction. And I really like to translate it like that, because it highlights that it is an active attitude towards a neutral feeling. And that is something that most teachers omit for some reason. And I will now try to give you a few other words that mean more or less the same thing to make it easier for you to map the word to something familiar. Craving, delighting, entertaining, wishing for, wanting, anticipating, longing for, having a goal, working towards, desiring, and of course all the corresponding negatives. This is craving. It's all the same. It's just different words to highlight the very same thing. Basically, any attitude of wanting your experience to be different than it is craving. If there is no craving, whatever state the 5 aggregates that your experience is in, it is fine by you. You don't want to change it, and as a result, no more real greed or aversion-based intentions would arise. And now, to the contemporary idea about how to deal with craving. The vast majority of people have a strange relationship towards it. They value it highly and regard it as something good. Whenever craving comes up, they immediately give in to the pressure of it, and it has to go away pretty much. In a sense, they don't notice that it is actually painful not to give in, because the reaction is almost immediate. As a result, they kind of ignore that craving is indeed painful and leads to addiction. So what do? They eat chocolate, watch movies, go on holidays, and do many more things, whatever the individual craving forces them to do. Some people get an inkling of the true nature of craving and want to stop. Those could be addicts, very disciplined people, or people with great wisdom due to past good deeds, so to speak. What they do is usually a bit different. Instead of giving in, they go against the grain for a while. Instead of eating chocolate, they eat healthily. Instead of being lazy, they exercise. Instead of being stressed, they meditate. Whatever problem they detect, they treat that problem and make it go away by means of something else. That could now be something wholesome or something unwholesome. Anyway, let us have a look at an especially obvious example, a drug addict. While drugs sound like they are something entirely different from all other pleasures, they are in fact not. They are just the same thing. At least if we, analyze it on a sufficiently general level. It is always about pleasure and pain. Drugs are just supremely visible in their drawbacks. A person might experience some bad feeling and start treating those bad feelings with drugs. They start soft with things like smoking, alcohol, and later marijuana or something like that. At some point, that isn't enough anymore. As the feeling of lack persists, and they go heavier and heavier until they, start injecting cocaine. And that is really a thing. That's probably the most horrible, probably not the most horrible. People come up with new drugs all the time, but it is a very horrible thing. Because I don't think there is anything more addictive. And after that, there isn't really anywhere to go. And they either die from overdosing or they go to rehab because of some supreme effort. And that person shifts from one addiction to the next, not noticing that the pleasure is not in the drugs, but in their mind, in their craving. While what they do changes all the time, it is still all about feeling good, all about avoiding bad feelings, or simply about distracting themselves from something very uncomfortable, for example, from the situation that they managed to get themselves into. Anyway, let us now assume that they do go to rehab and get their lives back on track. They slowly weaken or wean themselves off of the worst stuff or the worst drugs. They go from cocaine to maybe heroin to methadone, and in the end, they just start smoking. While they want to go back to their drugs with every fiber of their being, they stay strong, and after a while, and this can be a very, very long while for a person deep down the drug rabbit hole. In the end, the addict is no longer taking drugs, but they are still addicted. They are much healthier than before, but fundamentally, the craving is still there. Even if they have no longer any desire for cocaine, they still have desire, they still have craving. What changes is the object of attention and desire, and not that there is craving. As long as we replace something with something else, craving as a process, as a paradigm, as an overarching thing, remains just as strong and just as present as before. Only the object changed. We shifted our craving towards something else that has fewer direct negative consequences. The thing with craving is that it is not so much a snapshot of right now. It is much more about the overall valuing of pleasure, the overall valuing of good feelings. This is a problem. And this is something that most people cannot wrap their mind around. They think that if they stop and meditate for 2 hours each day on a cushion, they are free from craving at the time. Yeah, maybe, but overall you are still very valuing good feelings very much. And as such, you are still shackled by craving. And in contemporary meditation, things are not different at all. In fact, they follow the exact same principle. While modern meditators usually do not take drugs and are more healthy, they are still full of craving. And I don't say that lightly, but they don't see it because they think that craving is something different. And as a result, they have blind spots and not fully understood what craving is. And as such, they cannot make a breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths. In yoga, there is even the term pleasure bunny floating around for people who just chase good feelings. Those people are usually all about good feelings and emphasize those aspects of the Buddha Dhamma. When they see a jhana description, they leap out to the pleasure of it and want to experience the pleasure aspect. They chase the pleasure. When they get bored of that, their craving yet again shifts towards wanting more calm or tranquility, or they relish any kind of other aspect of their experience. The point is, there's always something they value. And that value, that is what must be overcome, because that value fuels the process of craving. When they get bored of that, their craving shifts yet again to something else. And this is the entire point. This is endless. It does not stop unless you follow the Buddha teachings rightly. This can go as far as having some minor insights and then relishing that new model of being, a new kind of perceiving the world. It's always about changing your situation to be better than before. The most fundamental craving is the craving for control, because without any control, it could not get to work towards what you want. You could not manipulate your experience to get more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff. For those meditators, there is no freedom. They are just as shackled as before, but in a different way. Fundamentally, there is literally no difference between addicts and the meditators here. And sooner or later, they will reborn in the same place. You don't have to believe in rebirth, by the way, but it's, according to the Sutta, that is kind of true. You do not weaken craving by shifting it towards something else. You weaken craving if you cease certain behaviors without replacing them with something else. Especially, you weaken craving by removing the desire completely and filling the free time with nothing. You want to undermine the value you have in good feelings, and not, the value in chocolate or whatever. This is why the Buddha talked about renunciation. He did not tell her to replace sensuality with other sensuality. He urged just to replace it with nothing, to renounce. In wanting nothing and having nothing, you become peaceful and happy. At least if you do it rightly. You die before you die, as Ajahn Chah said. And this is how you do it rightly. But keep in mind that that is just the very first step that prepares you to step on the Noble Eightfold Path. That very path starts with the right view or stream entry. But before that can happen, you must at least have sufficient virtue. And that sufficient is different from person to person. And I cannot tell you how virtuous you have to be. It depends on the person. In that context, virtue means that you are able to resist your cravings and do not act out of them. In doing so, the right kind of calm can arise, and you can start seeing clearly. Virtue is about permanent renunciation of certain things and behaviors, and not about sitting for 2 hours on the cushion. It includes way more than just the 5 precepts. The entire training in virtue is a training in trying to understand your intentions of craving. Whenever the Buddha talked about virtue, he talked about intentions of greed, intentions of aversion, and intentions of delusion or distraction. And people nowadays ignore that, and as a result, they cannot make any progress. That said, virtue alone is not enough. Virtue weakens craving so that it is truly not there for a time. Unlike shifting, there truly is no pressure. Yet, your underlying view that there are certain good things worth attaining for in the world, that is still there, and it will lead to the rearising of craving. And the reason for that no pressure is not that you have gotten what you wanted, and this is the important part of craving. Everyone, even the most deluded person on earth, can attain the kind of peace that arises when you get what you want. Instead, the Dhamma practitioner have starved craving, but they have not yet understood it. It may re-arise in the future. And why does craving re-arise? Well, because we value things deep down and must remove that value by seeing the danger in craving. And we must ultimately see that it is not ours, with wise attention, womb attention, or whatever you want to call it. You must understand dependent origination. This is what leads to the breakthrough to the Dhamma. This is what sets apart virtue from Dhamma practice. In fact, it is even supremely simple to test if you're roughly doing it right or wrong. You simply restrain your usual routines and things you like. Essentially, you make yourself apart from what you deem agreeable or pair yourself with what is disagreeable, but you don't really have to do that. Setting yourself apart from what you deem agreeable is usually enough. You will immediately or very soon notice resistance, suffering, craving, wanting, longing. As soon as you are apart from those things, the longing will arise, and you will notice it as very painful, as pressuring. It is usually hidden because you give in, and restraint makes it visible. If there is no pressure, then you are on the right path. Then you train in the right way. This is what it's like if you are truly free. When there is nothing to do, nothing to attain, then you are truly free, truly at peace. It is the most sublime thing, and in those situations, you are not pressured at all. It is the most sublime thing, the greatest joy when nothing is felt. Nothing pressures you. Perfect contentment all the time, having nothing to do, nothing to seek. And the Buddha even gave us a short sutta snippet on the topic. What do you think, Reverend? Is King Bimbisara capable of experiencing perfect happiness for 6 days, 5 days, 4 days, 3, 2, 1 day? No, he's not, Reverend. But I, the Buddha, am capable of experiencing perfect happiness for 1 day and night without moving my body or speaking. I am capable of experiencing perfect happiness for 2 days, 3 days, 4, 5, 6, and 7 days. What do you think, Reverend? In being so, who lives in greater pleasure, King Bimbisara or I? This being so, Venerable Gautama lives in greater pleasure than the king Bimbisara. And what the Buddha explains here is that he is at peace all the time. He does not need to manipulate his circumstances as he transcended those. He does not need good feelings anymore to be at ease. And when the feelings do not matter anymore, and feeling is what your entire experience as a Puthujjana, as an unenlightened person, converge upon, then what is there to strive for? You can just sit and be the happiest person in existence. And you don't have to meditate for that. Well, by the Sutta definitions, you would meditate, but you don't have to follow any technique. Anyway, let us now come to the most important points. First, there are 2 types of calm, the worldly type of calm and then the Dhamma kind of calm. And craving is what makes us feel uncalm, and it can be shifted towards other things. It can be given in so that the pressure goes away for a time, and it can be starved or uprooted. And only the uprooting really removes suffering for good. And this is what Dhamma practice is for. It is therefore, the craving to never arise again. And this is what we try to strive for. Only the uprooting removes suffering. Do not mistake shifting with the other types of practice. Only uprooting craving will get the job done. And most people will not even get close to the uprooting, as they do not even do the non-craving right. They just shift the non-craving, the renunciation, the not replacing your pleasures with something else. That is already not what people are doing. But anyway, this should be enough for this video. Again, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy what I do, feel free to like and subscribe. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.